Hello watch enthusiasts. Now about a year ago I produced a video on fantastic options for the smaller wristed in the way of dive watches. However, now I'd like to produce a video which is a little bit different. And this video encompasses all sports watches, and I've tried to include a great many different watches for different applications. Although most of the watches in this video do end up being dive watches, they offer very different aspects, and are all available in sizes which are very wearable for those with smaller wrists. However, before I begin the video, I would like to encourage you all to join the Watch Guys, which is my group on Snups, the social media platform for sharing pictures of your collections and interests, and where you can discuss matters of horology with myself and indeed other enthusiasts, and where I'll do my utmost to reply personally to any questions or video requests. Therefore, I would very much encourage you to follow the link down below, or download the app, which is available for iOS or Android, depending on what you're using to be most convenient, and join the great many others in the group to enjoy these additional features, which I really feel add to the channel experience, and to the ability to ask me questions and enjoy the watches and the interest in watches of other members. Now the first watch in this video is a true classic, I feel, of the dive watch world, and I did in fact talk about this watch in the video I produced on exclusively dive watches for smaller wrists last year. And I still think this remains a fantastic option for someone who wants a simple, legible, extremely reliable and very, very well made watch to adorn their wrist, despite the fact they have smaller or slimmer wrists. And this watch is only 37mm in diameter, but has a nice long lug-to-lug length, which means that despite its very narrow diameter, it is actually very wearable for a great many wrists, which does make it quite often a very interesting variation compared to, for example, a Seiko SKX013, which doesn't have the 013's wrist presence in terms of length, but has a more difficult to wear width, which for the smaller wrist is a problem. Similarly, the dial and hands are similar and reminiscent of the famous 007, but do in fact feature a very different setup, whereby the hands are far more arrow-shaped, and I feel this does make them more legible. Having looked at both of those watches, these hands, because of the segmentation on the minute hand for instance, it is extremely quick to read, and also I think many people prefer having the luminescent area on the second hand further towards the tip rather than behind the opposite side of the counterweight of the hand. And of course the case design of this watch is very typically Seiko, with its asymmetrical design whereby the crown is placed at just shy of 4 o'clock. And due to the case design as well, is protected by crown guards, and is also very easily used due to the fact that it is a large knurled crown. And with this watch you really do see nothing superfluous. The watch really does have a form-following function. And its case is of course brushed on the top of the lugs and then polished very nicely on the sides. But this is by no means a watch designed to be pretty per se, but designed to fulfill its task perfectly. And so it is a diver's 200-metre watch, which is to say that it is ISO certified, whereby it's tested with regards to temperature changes, as well as pressure changes over short and long periods of time, to establish whether these watches are in fact suitable for wear. And this makes this watch a far more reliable companion to other equivalent dive watches around this price point, and also is really the only one with this sort of size package, as well as having a nice automatic movement. Similarly, the external build of this watch is really fantastic, with an engraved caseback with what is often described as the Hokusai wave, which is based on the woodblock prints produced by the very famous Japanese artist. Additionally, the dial has this matte black base with these luminescent indices, which are very legible and clear, with the day-date complication at 3 o'clock, which again isn't framed or adorned with anything superfluous or unnecessary. But then that is very much in the beauty of this watch, the fact that it is truly all that it needs to be. And surrounding that is a very firm and grippy 120-click bezel, which I must say works extremely well and is graduated the whole way round. And the luminescence of this at 12 o'clock is also matching the dial and hands, which have a very long and extended glow due to Seiko's Lumibright, which is known to be extremely good as far as luminescent materials go, and generally considered superior to watches at this price point. And beating inside this watch is a Seiko 7S26, which is Seiko's base automatic movement, and for many isn't seen as a very illustrious movement at all because it isn't hacking or hand winding. But one has to remember that Seiko has its own proprietary automatic winding mechanism, which does mean that a few swings of the wrist and it's going, which is something that can't be said for a lot of Swiss automatics, and which does make this watch without its manual winding much more convenient, though if you do like a hacking watch this may well not be the watch for you. However, bearing in mind how reliable these watches are and how well built they are, they really do offer fantastic value for about £185 or a little bit more, as far as a dive watch with really brilliant specifications and a smaller size go. Now the second watch in this video is a very affordable piece from Hamilton, and I've talked really at length about this watch in the past in various videos. However, I feel that now there's all the more reason to include it, because this new version of the Hamilton Khaki automatic now features aspects which are very different to previously seen, because we now see more ornate styles of dials, as well as a movement which is modified significantly on the usual ETA base, and which I think makes this £390 watch all the more attractive to the buyer of an understated but very reliable and attractive wristwatch. Now the history of this watch is quite interesting, because it was used in various forms, albeit far less ornate forms, by various members of various armed forces in fact. Notably, for example, the US, a lot of soldiers used them in the Vietnam War, and throughout conflicts after that as well. And though they've been overtaken by companies like Marathon and CWC, because Hamilton have become more of a sort of a middle-range consumer brand rather than a pure military one, they still offer the resistance. So these watches are, with their 38mm cases, water-resistant to 100 metres, despite having an exhibition case back, and that beautifully polished bezel, which I think does add to a certain lustre to the front of this watch. Additionally, the rest of the case is brushed, apart from that polished crown, which again adds to the understatement of the rest of the case and brings out the bezel and dial, which is very, very nicely patterned, with matted sections, sunburst sections, and lowered sections with the numerals, which feature a sort of a sunburst effect, which is different to the central section, which again allows the light to play over the dial, and I think make what would normally be quite a simple and dull dial all the more interesting. The dial also features very clear luminescence on those numerals, with the military time underneath on that smaller ring, and the minutes around the edge with the date at 3 o'clock. Giving this dial a very traditional and simple layout, but in many people's eyes a very legible and clear one, with a little tip of red on the second hand to further accentuate the different hands and their sizes, as the hands point to their particular track, which is very helpful for someone reading the watch at a glance. And perhaps the most interesting aspect of this watch is the movement, because though it features a very similar architecture to the standard ETA 2824, with its 38-hour power reserve and 25 joules, this movement, which is the Hamilton H10, features a few modifications on that base. And firstly, you have the beat rate reduced from 4Hz to 3Hz, and that means that rather than ticking 8 times a second, it ticks 6 times a second, which means it does stutter a little bit, or a little bit more in a similar way to the way you would expect from, for example, one of the Seiko movements. But the benefit of that is that you get an 80-hour power reserve, which makes it extremely useful for someone who's going to be taking the watch off, for instance, or wants a very long power reserve if you're using it in testing circumstances, making this watch again far more usable. Despite the fact that you are making the sacrifice of an automatic movement for its resistance, you still get a lot of the practicality that you would with, for example, a Quartz. And so, as far as a complete package for a field watch goes, with a small area taken up on the wrist, and a very comfortable fit and wear, as the lugs of this watch do curve down, and having tried one of these watches on, and worn one for a bit just to see how it would fit on the wrist, I can say that these Hamilton Khakis really are very, very well designed, albeit very conservative, but nonetheless are very well designed. And the third watch in this video can very much be seen as the Hamilton I've just shown you, as diving alter ego, because this is a watch which is designed specifically for military divers and search and rescue parties, and these are Quartz watches. There is an automatic version available of the Marathon Quartz Medium Diver, but I felt that actually for the purpose of this video, because I'm talking about sports and more specifically tool watches, actually if offered a more reliable and potentially more rugged Quartz version, then perhaps that would actually be the better option considering the functionality of this piece. And this piece is a 36mm 300m diver made by Marathon, the military watch manufacturer. And these are Swiss-made watches with Swiss ETA F06 high torque, very accurate movements. And the Quartz movements in these watches are also very shock resistant and anti-magnetic with end-of-life indicators, so they will tick once every 4 seconds, I believe, rather than the normal tick every second, to show that they have a low battery life and so need a new battery change, which is something you would expect of a tool watch of this type. Similarly, these watches are extremely robust in terms of their case design, with, as I've said, a 300m ISO certified water resistance, so that's to say very heavily tested with regard to temperatures, magnetism, as well as various pressure changes and even noise, which can all have effects on the water resistance of a watch. and so this watch has been certified really within all the parameters that would be expected to produce a piece which is very, very robust and resilient, but is still usable for someone with smaller wrists, and contains all the functionality you would expect from a professional dive watch. And in terms of the case itself, we see a brushed finish all over this 316L case made of 316L stainless steel, as well as a heavily knurled crown which is very easily used with gloves, as well as a bezel which is extremely high, significantly higher and taller than a normal dive bezel, because it's designed to be used wearing gloves, which is again something that Marathon have taken into account with this timepiece. And being in many ways the most crucial part of the watch, the dial really has been very, very well executed by Marathon here, where we see both normal time and military time displayed, which again helps with the military aspect of this watch. Additionally, we see tritium tubes around the dial in different colours depending on whether they're at 12 o'clock or elsewhere, which makes this watch very easy to orientate in the dark. And these tritium tubes effectively work by having a hydrogen-3, in these glass tubes. And because this is a radioactive isotope of hydrogen, this beta radiation given off by these particles does in fact excite the surface of a sulfur base, and this serves to glow in the dark and provide a light which, unlike superluminova, doesn't fade, and in fact has a half-life of about 12 years, so you will get a fair life out of these dials before you have to have the dial or the tritium tubes replaced. And these are also seen on the hands with elongated tritium tubes, which really do help to make this watch extremely practical for someone using this in testing circumstances. And so for a price of £520, which still is a lot of money, I do think this watch offers an incredible amount to someone who is really going to be using a watch in difficult circumstances. And whether it's that you're going to use this watch as a dive watch, or indeed as a pilot's watch, say, or any other sort of sports watch, it'll serve the job extremely well as far as a robust and resilient piece goes, in a smaller size which, by comparison to the significantly larger models in 46mm and 41mm in the same range from Marathon, this watch really does offer very, very simple and really old-fashioned proportions which I feel suit a lot of wrists, and which do offer an understated form which simply wouldn't be the case with larger models of this type. And the penultimate watch I'd like to talk about is a piece which is perhaps seen to be a bit large for the category of a small watch, but nonetheless at 40mm and with a weight of only 85 grams, I feel the Damasko DC 56, 57 and 58 are excellent watches as far as a tool watch, which really offers all the functionality you could possibly expect from a resistant pilot's chronograph. And the simple nature of the design of these watches also makes them suitable really for any application where a highly legible dial, high luminescence, and extremely high resistance to elements is really crucial. And this watch does take a significant price jump from the Marathon, jumping up from £520 to £1,600 for this piece. And this may seem like a ludicrous jump, really, but I feel that actually it would be more worthwhile talking about this piece than pieces in between the two prices, because I feel this offers better value in terms of feature to feature. And the housing of this watch is a nickel-free, ice-hardened stainless steel case. And what that means is that it's a very pure type of steel, and has been hardened in this very particular way to give a surface hardness as well as a hardness all through its thickness of 710 Vickers. And this makes it extremely resistant to scratches and bumps, which is extremely useful really when you have a watch which is going to be bumped around a cockpit. And unlike other hardened coatings, this does go through the entire thickness of the metal, not just the surface. Additionally, this case does offer a very high magnetism, which is not something you would normally want in a watch. But as a result of this, Damasko have put extra work into making this watch anti-magnetic, and so due to an inner Faraday cage, it is in fact anti-magnetic to 1000 Gauss, which is really the industry standard for a very anti-magnetic watch. Similarly, it's very, very resistant to dust and water ingress, being water resistant to 100 meters, as well as having the added benefit of crowns and pushers, which are built with particular attention to having incredibly slim tolerances. And for example, the crown itself is self-lubricating with a self-lubricating cell, which allows the crown to never really to wear out, and so as a result, the threadings on the screw-down aspect of the crown won't allow the crown to become loose over time, and thus allow dust and any humidity into the watch. One other benefit which is built into the case of these watches is the fact that you have Vuitton seals, which are built specifically to resist UV and chemicals. and this means they won't degrade like normal seals over time, and also won't be damaged by general contact with pHs which would normally destroy seals. And this means that you really can be assured that these watches will resist really anything you throw at them, which is quite fantastic considering the fact that these are watches which are very simple in terms of aesthetics, but have all this technology built into the functions and the build of the watch as a whole. Of course, these watches are also extremely competent pilot's watches, bearing in mind the fact they are negative pressure resistant, so can resist, for example, ejecting from a high pressure cockpit to the low pressure of external air, thus making them seal to the elements despite this negative change in pressure. Additionally, you do have the chronograph, which is of course the most visible feature of this watch, and is of course based on the Vegel 7750, which is a very easily serviced movement, and is the simplest part, really ironically, of this watch, but does still feature the day-date complication displaced below the 3 o'clock position to be moved away from the Damasko logo. Additionally, the second hand on the left-hand side of the dial at 9 o'clock is broken down, which allows it to be still legible, but the eye to be drawn to the more clear indications of the chronograph time along that central axis, which I think makes this watch a very elegant timepiece, whether you have it in a DLC black, a simple steel finish, or a black or white dial with blue accents, for instance. Which means this watch really is a wonderful piece if you're looking for a technical piece which can be specified to your particular details. And I know that Damasko are also able to do engravings, for instance, on the case back. Now the final watch is a piece which I think was rather predictable, and this is the Sinn U200. Now the U200 is a watch which I've talked about in depth really previously when talking about some extremely good value ISO divers. And as far as technology goes for a mechanical watch which offers incredible water resistance and legibility, there really is nothing that can beat the Sinn U200 as far as smaller sizes go. And this is a 37mm watch with a submarine steel case, and that's to say a particular grade of steel used by the German Navy, which does in fact have corrosion-resistant properties, which are far beyond anything seen on any other type of steel. Additionally, this type of steel is the most anti-magnetic type of steel in the world, and so as a result is a type of steel which means that you can get a watch which, inadvertently, or at least in an unplanned way, was in fact in the end anti-magnetic to 1000 Gauss. Similarly, this watch features technology which really other brands can't compete with, such as the tegament process on the bezel of this watch. And this is a process whereby the surface of the bezel is treated with various chemicals and in various ways to harden it enormously to about 1500 Vickers, giving it a surface hardness which is similar, or at least very nearly equivalent to the 1800 Vickers of sapphire. And this makes that area of the watch which will be in contact with bumps and knocks far more regularly than the rest of the case, far more resistant to these bumps and shocks. Whilst this does have the effect of making it a little bit more brittle, which again is suitable for this area of the case, because it means that this area can be a sacrificial piece if you bump the watch, because it's very easy to replace these bezels by simply undoing the screws around their edge. Also, this case features Sinn's proprietary AR dehumidifying technology. And this is something I've talked about a great deal, but as a simple recap, it's the inclusion of a copper sulfate capsule inside the case. And what this means is that the case, which is already filled with inert gas rather than air to avoid corrosion and moisture, is able to be protected from any residual moisture by a copper sulfate capsule which absorbs any water vapour, or indeed any water droplets inside the case, and keeps it very dry. Additionally, this will in fact turn blue and can be seen through a little glass window in the side of the case, which allows you to judge when this capsule needs to be changed as a result of this water absorption. Of course, the primary reason why this watch is such a fantastic dive watch is the legibility and the water resistance. And in terms of legibility, you have this Eisensatzmesser dial, which has these beautiful and very carefully designed sword hands, and these very, very clear indices. And these are all very heavily loomed with that large loomed triangle on the bezel as well. And this 2000 meter dive watch is helped very much by these details to make it a very legible and simple to use package, which is perfect really for any diver who needs a watch to rely on. And underneath all of these features sits a 26 Joule Sleater SW200. And this is a very simple movement based on the ETA 2824 architecture, but certainly which carries the load as far as being a reliable and very easily serviced movement, which is incredibly resistant to bumps which far more elaborate movements simply wouldn't be able to take. And of course with Sinn's adaptations of the mountings of the movement, It is also very, very shock resistant, which is again a testament to the care Sinn take to produce a watch which really is fit for any purpose and resilient in the most testing and difficult of circumstances where most watches would seem to be unable to operate. And so as a result of all of these reasons, I feel this watch really is perfect for a buyer who wants a timepiece of a smaller size but with no compromise in technology or indeed in innovation. And frankly, for the price of this watch, I don't think actually anything else can be found with similar specifications, or indeed anything to match the sheer robust resilience this watch offers. Anyway, I'll conclude the video here, but thank you very much for watching, and please do like, share and subscribe to be able to enjoy more content in future, and to help the channel. Also, do please leave your comments down below as to what you thought of the watches in this video, and my choices for smaller wrists. So thank you very much for watching. Sam on the Watch Guy, over and out.